one day I will tell you there are no new cases.
And I'll read that the Nightingale is closing down.
We'll take time to reflect and remember those lives lost.
And we'll hug our loved ones.
Our kids will play with their friends and finally go back to school.
We will see our colleagues again.
Sport will return, whether you like it or not.
Cafes, shops and cinemas will open their doors.
One day, plans will be made and kept.
And until then, we'll be here to help you understand what's happening every step of the way.
Hello, welcome. I'm John Mayer. Welcome to my virtual Jericho, which is a weekly series for Jericho and much, much further afield. We've now been virtual for 6 months, each and every Wednesday afternoon. Today, we're going to talk about the future of the BBC. Is it in jeopardy? Tim Davie has been Director General for 1 week. He's already made a splash, setting out his stall and reversing some of the bad decisions of the week and previous DG. But Tim has inherited some huge financial albatrosses. The over 75s free licence fee, which could cost £750 million a year, plus the expected decriminalisation of not paying the licence fee. That's another £250 million a year. So £1 billion of revenue stands to be lost. That's a quarter of the BBC's revenue gone. So who better to discuss it than Andrew Graham? The former master of Balliol College, Oxford, a noted economist. He advised Harold Wilson, remember him, and John Smith, and he served on the board of Channel 4, the Scott Trust, and as a consultant to the BBC. He knows his broadcast economics. By the by, he's a Greater Jericho resident, and he's the son of the author of Poldark. He looks after his literary legacy. Andrew, over to you.
John, thank you so much. And what a very nice clip about the BBC. I'd like to start with two thanks. First to you for driving all of this forward and to bringing out the books that you've been doing. And there's another one, I think, coming fairly shortly called Now is the Winter of the BBC's Discontent. And my other thanks, I don't know whether either Paddy Barwise or Peter York are on the line, but they've got a book coming out later this autumn called The War Against the BBC, and they very, very kindly let me see an advance copy, and I'll certainly be using some of the things that they say there. But I'd like to start slightly strangely by suggesting instead of looking at me, you look out of the window. And what do you see? Well, I don't know where you are. If you're lucky like me, you see a bit of grass, but you might see some dustbins or some rubbish. But I can pretty much guarantee that what you won't see is the glass. And of course, the point is, before glass, Europe was dark and cold and horrible. And the even deeper point is that we take the glass for granted. And I fear that that's what a lot of us in the UK are doing with the BBC and possibly with the wider British democratic structure. So I'm going to talk first about the BBC and why I think it's so important, and then some shorter remarks about British democracy. I want to begin with a Hungarian proverb, obviously not in Hungarian, but in English, which says that if you put on a waistcoat incorrectly, not that many people have those these days, but if you put on a waistcoat incorrectly, you've got to unbutton it all the way down before you can put it on correctly. And there are quite a lot of big buttons lying around with the BBC that people have put in place and are still there and mistaken. One of the biggest mistakes began with the Peacock Report in 1986. And its argument was basically that once we moved to digital television, the natural monopoly of the BBC was gone and there was no need for a BBC. We could sell the BBC just like we would sell books in any normal market. That was in 86, but it was repeated in 2004 by Barry Cox, and just a couple of years ago by the person who was then the advisor to Peacock. So this is around, it's very deep-seated, the belief that because technology makes it possible to buy and sell programs, that's what we should do. There are two big errors. The first is that just because something is possible, that doesn't make it desirable. It's what some people call the technological determinism. But that's not the way the world is. We have to decide the way the world is and what kind of society we want to be in. And the second mistake, a more technical one within economics, is that broadcasting isn't like buying a restaurant meal or a car or a cup of tea. When I consume any of those, they're not yours, they're gone. But when you and I watch a television program, I can watch it, it doesn't stop you watching it. It's what economists call a public good. And it's exactly like if you created a national park, why would you want to charge people to go into it? Even though their mobile phone these days would make it possible to tell you how long they stayed there and you could charge them, it would be idiotic. You've created the thing, let people use it. And just one other thing about the difference between what's possible and what's desirable. We don't think that just because cars can drive at 100 miles an hour, it's sensible to let them do so. And I don't know about the rest of you, but I don't think just because the President of the United States uses tweet and is able to do so, that's the best way to govern a country. The second mistake is a bit simpler. It's put in various forms. It's essentially that the BBC is too large and it's pushing out all sorts of other things. I don't think the people saying this or the people listening to the argument are really thinking hard about the numbers. The Voice of the Listener and Viewer has recently done some calculations showing that since 2010, what's happened to the license fee has already reduced BBC's income by nearly a third. John Mayer at the beginning mentioned the fact that the BBC is now threatened with the license fee being decriminalised, which means many people would choose to free ride if they were able to do so. And also the BBC might have to pick up the costs of licenses for the over 75s. Those two things would take the cuts to of the order of 50%. And I think it's even bigger than that because people's incomes have been going up. Even in a slow growing country like the UK, people's incomes keep growing up. And so the spending on the BBC represented by the license fee is going down even more. So it's not too big. It's probably half or less the size it used to be. The third mistake is the argument that the BBC's existence is bad for competition and bad because it constrains consumer choice. Why shouldn't people not have to pay the license fee and be free to go off and buy Netflix or whatever they wish to do? The essential mistake here is that this is analyzing the world as if we were only ever consumers. All of us are both consumers and citizens. And one of the main reasons the BBC exists, and I'll say more about this, is because of what it provides for citizens. And all the stuff about the market just falls away once you move into that area. A fourth argument, much more recent and very powerful, is that, of course, social media, everybody can watch everything on their iPhone. Who the hell needs the BBC? They can stream anything they like from anywhere in the world. But let's note that alongside the rise in social media, two other things have been going up rapidly. One is a growth in fake news, and the other is a tendency for societies to be polarized. And just to give you an argument about some facts about fake news, research done shows that in just 2 years, the number of countries where misinformation had become a serious problem had grown from 28 to 70. The second bit of information, on a big global survey, 9 out of 10 people agreed they'd been duped at least once. But of course, it's got to be more than that, because of all those times when you were duped and didn't know it. So there's a huge amount of fake information, misinformation around, and we can see society being more polarized in the US between Trumpites and non-Trumpites, in the UK, Brexit, etc. The interesting question for me, and the important question, I think for all of us, is whether these things are causally related. And I think recent research strongly suggests that they are. It takes a long time to spell it all out, but in a nutshell, what the internet allows you to do and do easily is find like-minded people. And once you've found like-minded people, you tend to get into an echo chamber with them. And once you're in an echo chamber, information that you like, you amplify. information you dislike, even when it's correct, you criticize and label as false news, fake news. Those are 4 arguments why I think people are attacking the BBC, and I've given my reasons why I think all of them are mistaken. Why don't you just shuffle on your chair for a minute and take stock? Because I'm going to move to 4 reasons why we ought to care about the BBC, and which in a way are a response to the 4 points that I've already made. And let me start with the citizenship argument and human rights. Once upon a time, it used to be non-contentious to say that we in the UK had promoted the human rights that are embodied in the UN Convention. And indeed, the European Convention on Human Rights was driven by the UK, the one that some members of this government want to get us out of. It wasn't imposed by Europe, we did it. And we used to think these human rights were important. And the rights that the UN conventions embed are the right to be well informed about your own society and to play a full democratically in your society. And it's absolutely critical that the BBC is universal and free at the point of use. And it gives you a lot of the information that you need in order to participate in society. Being mildly technical, it's a prior condition before the market can work well. It's not competing with the market, it's allowing markets to function. The second point about the BBC is that it's got a fundamentally different purpose than the private markets. Its purpose is to produce public service broadcasting, to serve everyone and to give authentic pictures of the world, not to tell lies, to be impartial. And just to give you an example of what happens in the private sector, there's a very good book by Robin Williams, and he documents that US radio stations, people who work for them, have said that they know that racial hatred sells, and that maximizes audience. So the BBC is a positive influence on society. There's also the fact that because it's a positive, very, very crucial to the BBC, it's not regulating, it's not stopping you. It's part of a system. And it's part of this. Lots of people over the last 20 or 30 years have said that in the UK, the ecology of broadcasting has been good because the BBC has been high quality. And that has caused everybody else to be high quality. It's like being in a good football team. It improves all of you. It's part of the company you keep. And just bizarrely and paradoxically, just at the moment, think about that a bit further. Why is the UK not only so good with the BBC, but so effective in the creative industries? Many of these people are people who the BBC trained and went out into the creative industries and with the professional standards they learned. And the BBC keeps them up to scratch. And what's paradoxical about this is actually the BBC is a form of state aid. And what do we have? Mr. Johnson suddenly waking up to the need for state aid, but now wanting to attack the BBC, which is one of the most effective forms of all. And another thing to be noted, in the middle of the ideology which told us that the only thing that mattered was markets, in 2007, 8, 9, the BBC was part of a plan called Kangaroo, which would have launched an initial video on demand. They were stopped on competition grounds, and that allowed Netflix and co to get into the act first. Wouldn't it have been much better if the BBC had been in there first and not been coming along second and later with BritBox? John will be relieved to know that I'm nearly at the end, but I want to make a few remarks about the wider picture, about whether we're taking British democracy for granted. There are many, many things that could be said here, but I regard all the 4 points as pretty fundamental to the way the British system works. We expect the executive to be accountable to Parliament. We expect to follow the rule of law. We believe in a neutral civil service, And we believe the fourth estate, that's the media and the broadcasters, to be honest and to hold the government to account. Well, if you've been following the news recently, all four of those are currently being questioned. Members of Parliament, if they step out of line, are removed from the whip. Julian Lewis, following the rules that the government itself set down, stood for being the chair of the Security Committee. And the government, the number 10, took away the whip. Dominic Grieve, not normally a raving lefty, said they must have been losing the plot. The rule of law. Johnson suspends Parliament. It's referred to the Supreme Court. It comes back with a unanimous verdict that Johnson has been wrong. Does Johnson apologize? No, he just says they're wrong. And now they're discussing, they're setting up a commission to investigate the reform of the judiciary. And it's being mooted, not yet done, but the judges will be vetted by Parliament. What about about neutrality of the civil service? Well, we've already had several permanent secretaries moved out of their office. We have special advisors under Gove. Gove gives a speech at Ditchley several weeks ago talking about how important it is to have competent people, and special advisors not open to proper competition, not given scrutiny at all, are put over civil servants. This is the civil service which has been admired. People outside the UK believe in the strength and efficiency of the British service. It's only inside it that it gets criticised. And of course, the fourth estate, that's why I'm giving this talk. The BBC is under attack across the pitch, and quite systematically so. And if I go back to the book that Paddy Barwise and Peter York are bringing out, they will document for you the many think tanks on the right which are orchestrating the nature of the attack. So to conclude, I come back to where I began, the glass. Whether we take the BBC for granted, whether we take our democratic structure for granted. And I'm not normally a conspiracy theorist, and I think I've come to these conclusions just by careful analysis. But I am slightly uneasily reminded of the quote that many of you may know by the German theologian, Martin Niemöller. First, they came for the communists, and I didn't speak out because I was not a communist. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I didn't speak out because I wasn't a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I didn't speak out because I wasn't a Jew. And then they came for me, but there was nobody left to speak out for me. Thank you very much.
Andrew, thank you. There's an awful lot in there to think about and ask you about. Now, you're a BBC lover. You're born and bred a BBC lover. But the BBC has been imperial, hasn't it, in terms of spreading into radio, into internet, any new field it spreads into. Is that justified?
Well, I suppose, what would we think if the BBC, once the radio had come along, it hadn't occupied television? Wouldn't we have thought we were just missing on a possibility to talk to ourselves as a country? I mean, what would have ever have happened to all those panorama programs, all the news programs, which are, if we'd left that to a private set of broadcasters, we'd have had like US television, which I have to say, I don't want to live under that kind of country. If you've been to New Zealand, they got rid of their public service broadcaster, and most New Zealanders tell me the whole broadcasting system has gone downhill. So I think the move into television was right. I think the move from black and white to color was right. I think the move from color into internet was correct. So I think that they really have been moving in the areas that you'd expect them to not be innovative and not want to occupy. There's nothing imperialist about it, it's just being innovative. And indeed, if you want to, I don't want to talk with the language of imperialism, but the BBC is respected across the world. And it's part of, if the UK wants to go on having some kind of impact and voice, it's a very important part of soft power, not in a top-down way, but just giving people news that's trusted.
But you founded the Oxford Internet Institute, and the BBC was one of the first to move into the internet, into that sort of news. The newspapers say it's not their job.
What, to provide trusted news?
Yes.
Or to be in the internet?
The newspaper should do that even on the internet, even digitally. What's your reaction to that?
To saying that, do I think, well, look, various of the newspapers at one point or another have massively distorted their stories and be called to account. I mean, the phone hacking scandal was outrageous. I think with the way in which these newspapers will do anything to get newspapers sold doesn't put them as a very good example. I'm not going to, look, there are a number of luckily the UK has a number of very good newspapers. And we're glad to see it. And the US has a small number, but not national. But I'm not going to go around saying I want to defend all newspapers or attack all newspapers. I can draw a distinction between those who try to report accurately and those that don't.
Yes, but they say, look, digital space belongs to us, not to the BBC.
That's the argument about competition, which I thought I'd tried to describe earlier. But let me have another go at it. Given that people are now getting so much of their information via internet and interrelated devices, if the BBC is not there giving them the core information about their society, there's no guarantee that they're going to get it from the newspapers. But people need the core information about their rights when they're buying products to even begin to operate in the market, and even to know what kind of redress they might have against a new newspaper that was breaking the law. The BBC and what it provides is a prerequisite for the market, not in competition with the market.
So it keeps everybody honest, is your view?
Yes, yes. Well, it would be good if it did. It tries hard.
Now, BBC has 19,000 employees, 19,000, 5,000 of them in news. That's surely too many.
Well, we go back, there are sort of 60 plus million people in the UK.
Yes,
some people, 66 million people in the UK. Some people are claiming that the reason that the BBC should be got rid of is that people aren't using it. That's simply not true. I think there was a survey in 2015 showing that in a single week, 99% of households use the BBC at least once. So I don't think 19,000 people serving 66 million does too badly. Thank you very much.
Okay, but I mean, it's still in many senses bloated. I mean, and Tim Davie, the new Director General, has said that. He said, he wants to reduce the headcount.
Look, we're all in favor of efficiency, but I'm not in favor of efficiency when what's basically being said, the organization needs to shrink. I don't think it does need to shrink. If it can produce the same from less people, who's going to fight that? If it can produce the same from the same quality of people, who's going to fight that? Is it the case that the BBC has got some executives that it's paying a bit too much? Very probably, yes. Is it the case that it underpaid some of its women people? Very probably, yes. Is the BBC doing everything in its human resource management to get the diversity it needs? No. There's a lot of things about the BBC that ought to be got right, but those are internal management questions, not do we want the BBC? And I think we need a big BBC to give us the ability, all of us, to operate in the society in the way that we want. And let me just expand on one point. People say, well, why, Andrew, or what some people say is, Andrew, you're talking about the inform and educate part. Why do we need all the entertainment part? Well, one of the things that the BBC does in the entertainment part is it depicts the society in a way that's not disrespectful to its members. It's authentic. It gives people an image of the lives they might lead, which had never even considered. And in a sort of economist language, the BBC is a merit good. You don't always know at the moment when you buy the program quite what its impact on you will be many years later. I mean, think of all the, sorry, your turn.
What do you miss it if it went away? If it was abolished?
What did we miss? Well, we'd miss a reliable news service that is trusted more than any other news source in the country. It's trusted far more than newspapers, far more than the popular newspapers, far more than politicians. So we'd miss a trusted source. We'd throw away nearly 100 years of very high quality British stuff. Having created one of the most revered broadcasters in the world, why on earth would you want to not do it? I mean, just imagine, could Live Aid, on the way that it was organized, have been put in place by a series of American television companies? They wouldn't have done it. It was the Martin Burke report about Ethiopia, which was on the BBC, that caused people to understand the famine in Ethiopia. That was changed people's views of the whole of aid. It was dramatic. We would miss it massively, both for entertainment and for education.
Has the BBC had a good COVID war, do you think? How have they done it in the past?
I think it's had a pretty good COVID war. I mean, it's been struggling with the fact that, of course, the messages from the government have been pretty confusing, and the BBC has to report the messages. So don't shoot the messenger. If the BBC's been reporting what the government's saying and reporting it accurately, which it has, don't shoot the messenger. I think the BBC had a pretty good war. We'd be pretty glad to feel it was there and trying to talk to people, telling us, look, I'm enough of a postmodernist to know that the truth is a very, very difficult thing. But there was a very clever philosopher, Bernard Williams, who wrote a book called Truth and Truthfulness. And he said, what people who are trying to serve society are doing, both as academics, as good broadcasters, good journalists, they should be truth tellers. And I think we can distinguish truth tellers from those who are peddling falsehoods. And that's what the BBC should be doing.
Sorry. Have you watched other broadcasters during the pandemic? Sky News has been outstanding.
I watch Sky News a lot, and I think Channel 4 has been tremendous. I watch Channel 4 probably actually at least as much as I watch the BBC. I think Channel 4 has been terrific.
But Sky News has been doing a great public information. In every commercial break, they give you information.
Yeah, Sky News is the lost leader for the Murdoch empire. It has to match the BBC in credibility in order to make it look as if the rest of the Murdoch outfit is on the same standard, which is not true.
No longer owned by Murdoch.
That's true. But that's why it got up to quality when it was trying to match. You're quite correct. But that's why it got up to quality when it was trying to match.
Whilst we have Ofcom, we have some standards in all factual broadcasting, don't we?
Well, it's Ofcom who said that the BBC is a trusted source. Mm-hmm. But it was also Ofcom who ruled against the BBC going ahead with Kangaroo. Or Ofcom and, yeah, I think it was Ofcom.
CMA. Can you go back to that? Explain what Kangaroo was and why it was kiboshed.
Well, Kangaroo was a plan in which the BBC and a number of the other British broadcasters, ITV, etc., would have teamed up with people across the world to launch what Netflix is now doing in spades. There would have been high quality video on demand. And if the BBC had got in there, it wouldn't be struggling, it is now 10 years later, to catch up. It would have had first mover advantages. But it was shut down because it was feared that this was the BBC encroaching too much on commercial operations. And it was the question of whether you should have Kangaroo or not was viewed entirely on what I recall as the narrow competition grounds, not on the citizenship grounds. And also, it wasn't properly assessed, in my view, in terms of what was happening across the world. I mean, the BBC is in the UK, it's in competition with ITV, BBC, and the various other channels. But the big beasts with whom the BBC is competing internationally, Amazon, Facebook, Apple, etc. And it wasn't remotely threatening them. And indeed, if we don't want, I mean, I'm just deeply perplexed why someone would think that it was against British interests to be able to compete internationally successfully. I mean, we've got not very many industries which were doing things well in 1922 and are still doing them well in 2022. We haven't got a car industry, we haven't got a bicycle industry, we haven't got a motorcycle industry. We've got a broadcasting industry with the BBC at its core, and we've got some universities, both of which are under attack by the government.
Including yours. Now, the license fee, some people say, is anachronistic. Should it be just for factual programs, the thing called BBC Premium subscription for entertainment programs and other things?
I have two views about that. One is a clear view, and one is one where I think I'm open to thinking a lot further. I know that the new DG has suggested that it might be a two-tier system. Maybe, is what I say. My instincts are that that's going to get us into two classes of people. And I don't think that's the way for Britain to go. Right back at the beginning, Reith had some very pertinent words about not wanting a two-class system. So my instincts are that that's not the way to go. But it may be that there needs to be another look at how the BBC is paid for. I don't think subscription is remotely the answer. I mean, almost by definition, subscription means the BBC is no longer universal. And you'd be just giving it to those who can pay. That's not the point of the BBC. The subscription is completely counter to the purposes. But there might be, I mean, Paddy Barwise and Peter York float some ideas. I want to think a little bit more about what they're. I think I'll wait till their book's out for them to say their bit on that. I'm not open, I'm not close-minded about whether there could be some alternatives, but most of the ideas that have been looked at so far have not been found to be very persuasive. And
10 million people pay up to 100 quid a month to Sky, for example, and Netflix and Amazon as well.
Yeah,
I
think 157 quid for a license fee looks pretty cheap compared with, say, minimum 300 for Sky.
Yes, but people have this subscription habit now, so they would probably buy the extras, wouldn't they?
I don't think so. I think that the reason, look, the fact is the license fee, despite what everybody says about it, the great majority of people pay it. And the great majority, as I've already explained, the vast majority of people are using the service. So there's no reason why they shouldn't pay it. And the argument that it's expensive to collect, that's not true. It is true that if you decriminalized it, it would be much more difficult to collect. That would be a very stupid thing to do. We don't plan to decriminalize income tax or VAT or anything like that. I mean,
it's going to happen, isn't it? It's as night follows day.
That's in technological determinism, which I don't accept, or maybe it's political determinism, which I don't accept either.
But I mean, you've read the Sunday Times about what Dominic Cummings said about the BBC. He wants to whack it.
Well, I know what Dominic Cummings seems to think. That's why I'm giving this talk, because I don't agree. I'm a democratic citizen. I'm hoping a few other people might become alert to what I see as a very centralizing tendency on the part of the government. And I believe that if you're going to have a democracy, you've got to trust people. You've got to not only give them the vote, but you've got to give them the information to vote. And that requires giving them good programs, factually based. I think there's an interesting debate about impartiality versus accuracy. I'm not quite yet persuaded that Tim Davies correct to have stressed the impartiality bit so heavily. I think I'd be much happier if they dug in on truth-telling and accuracy. I think partiality gets you into all sorts. I mean, what are you going to do about partiality with two people, one of whom thinks that the world was created in 7 days, and the other one who is a modern genetic scientist? I don't think you can be partial between those two. It just doesn't make sense. We've got to distinguish between some truths have more plausibility and evidence and underpinning than everything else. You can't just say that just because one person speaks loudly, they have to be given the same media space as another person who speaks loudly.
Talking about Tim Davies, the new Director General, a couple of quick questions. Does it worry you he has a Tory background? And secondly, if he invited you into his office and said, Andrew, you've got a minute to tell me what to do in the next 10 years. I'm going to be here for 10 years. What should I do?
Truth-telling.
That's all you say.
That doesn't worry me that he's a Conservative. There are lots of the top BBC people are Conservatives, and lo and behold, it still gets attacked. But it's probably easier for a Conservative to change the mind of Conservatives than people in the Labour Party.
Now, there is a proposal. There may be a British Fox TV coming down the line with Theresa May's ex-director of communications in the driving seat. What's your view on that?
I think I've already expressed it by my look. I think it would be just I think it's just a disaster zone. I mean, I think it's Fox TV is a little bit more sophisticated than some of the US radio stations, but it does polarize their society even more. I don't think that's what we want. I think that we need to understand. Look, a very good philosopher once pointed out to me an extremely simple point, but simple points are often very powerful. He said, unless you can agree on something, you're just having a shouting match. Mm-hmm. And I think Fox News encourages shouting matches, not finding the things which we might discuss and then find out where it's perfectly sensible to agree to disagree. But we have to find some common ground. And I don't think Fox News accepts that. It doesn't like the language of human rights. It doesn't subscribe to that. It isn't really very democratic.
But Boris and Dom have another 4 years. They could abolish Ofcom. They could get rid of that. They could change the law so that you don't have to be truthful and everything else in factual broadcasting. What's to stop them doing that?
Well, all sorts of British society has all sorts of ways that we should argue. Look, I'm an academic. I know enough about modern literature to know that the way to change people's minds these days is unfortunately to get at their emotions. We all have these two bits of our brains, the emotional bit and the rational bit. But the bit that I'm trained to deal with is the rational bit. And so I think you just got to get the arguments out there. There are a lot of backbench MPs who will listen to their constituents if their constituents say, but the BBC is a national treasure. What are you trying to do? Destroy the BBC? Why are you trying to reduce the soft power that Britain has? There are a lot of people in the Conservative Party who I think share my views. And look, hand up, I'm a member of the Labour Party, but I'm not I've never been a Marxist or card-carrying Trotskyist or anything like that. I'm in the part of the Labour Party. I'm a Democrat before I'm a member of the Labour Party. And I think there are a lot of Conservatives who are Democrats at least as much. So we have to talk to them, we have to get the arguments out, and then we have to persuade people. And we have to think of evocative ways of getting across the fact that it was the Live Aid concert that made you change your mind about what you wanted to do in the world, and that was the BBC. We have to get across the fact that you saw a black woman in charge of an Oxford college, and you thought, yep, I could do that. Or a woman...
It hasn't come yet. She's coming in October, Andrew.
Okay, they're coming. A woman commissioner of the BBC, of the Metropolitan Police. These portraying these things as facts and getting... Do you know that one of the critics of Bodyguard complained that it was too PC because it had a woman as the Home Secretary and a woman as head of the police, when in the real world we had a woman Home Secretary and a shadow minister as a woman and a woman head of the police. So fact was even further than where this critic was trying to complain. I mean, it's just ridiculous, some of the things are being said, and said as if they're based in some serious analysis. They're not.
But in the last 3 years, we've had things you wouldn't believe happened. We've left Europe, we've 80-seat majority, we've thrown Liberal MPs out of Parliament. Anything is possible, surely, in this populist dream.
Well, that's a very fair point, but it fires me to effort, not to despair. I mean, if you go back a bit further about things that we've taken for granted, I mean, I and you and a lot of other people, I hope some of those listening, if they think about it, they've grown up in a world in which we sort of thought that what happened in the late 18th century and into the 19th century, the age of enlightenment, in which reason came to dominate faith and facts to dominate dogma and merit to dominate hereditary. And that the rule of law was terribly important. I don't think I want to throw those things away. And I think that a lot of people who take the views that I'm very willing to spend my time talking to people who disagree with me, but willing to do it, spend time. That's what I'm doing all the time. I've set up a new scholarship in order to try and get people in different European countries talking about things across Europe that affect us all. I'm an academic. I have to do what an academics do and do well. Look at the evidence and argue. And that's what I'm going to keep on doing.
Now, you've worked in Number 10. If Boris were to invite you in, Boris and Dom, and say, okay, Andrew, give us your recipe for the BBC in 1 minute, or give us your advice, what should we do?
Back off. Not in your long run interests.
Just that.
Boris. Dominic, I don't have anything to say to him. He wasn't appointed by any open competition. He's not elected. He's not accountable to anybody. I have to say, I think he's a dangerous person, and I wouldn't be engaged in conversation with him.
Now, you were Master Balliol. Did you teach Boris?
No.
Some of your colleagues did.
Yes.
What impression are they left with? What did they think of him as a student, as a person?
One of the former masters is on record as likening Boris to Talleyrand, who he thought had misled everybody.
Was that the master that Boris stitched up by making up a quote?
No.
No, there's more than one master.
I think the truth is that I think all of us who've known all those people, the serious point is this, really serious. All the people who've known Boris as heads of their college, tutors, employers, people in close personal relationships who are no longer in those close personal, every single one of them has said that his understanding of the truth is something that seems to be deeply, deeply lacking. He evades, he obscures, he says one thing today and another thing tomorrow. His connection with the truth is deeply, deeply lacking.
Well, how much television do you watch? What do you watch?
I watch, actually, I've been very busy recently and watching it rather less. But in general, I try to watch a news program once or twice a day, and then probably something very different. I mean, sometimes it'll be something rather, drama like Line of Duty, or Planet, an Attenborough program, or something that provokes me. I watch Netflix a certain amount because I think it has good stuff on it. I watch ITV programs. I don't stay just with the BBC, but I do watch the BBC quite a lot. I probably watch television between an hour and 2 hours most days.
And what have you watched or heard on the BBC recently that's impressed you most?
Normal People was brilliant, absolutely brilliant. I'm not of the age of those two young people, so I don't know what young people thought about it, but I thought the sensitivity of the way in which it dealt with people unsure of where they were going, of what they wanted to do in life, of what they felt for each other, of what they felt able to say to each other, I thought was phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal.
Did you watch One Day in the Life of Iraq, the documentary series?
I haven't watched that. Sorry, I haven't. No.
It is actually superb.
Yeah.
Watch it on BBC iPlayer if I can.
Yeah, I will. I'll do a catch up.
Now, Professor Sylvia Harvey has asked a question. What's wrong with popularity? Look at how popular BBC News is compared to Sky. So what's wrong with that? And Netflix doesn't have any foreign correspondents. So why should the BBC not be popular?
I don't have anything against the BBC being popular. I never said. I don't. If I did, I'd delete it. I don't have any. Look, this is in the jargon. This is called reach. And there's nothing wrong with indeed a public service broadcaster, if it's trying to be serving the whole community, needs to be reaching everybody. So I don't have any problem at all about popularity, but popularity is not its only measure. I mean, I could put up a little chart, but I won't because that would get boring, about the way an advertised funder will seek maximum audience. What the BBC tries to do is to maximize what the economists would say, maximize the area on the demand curve. So if lots of people would pay quite a lot for a program, they take that into account. But if some people would still pay a little, they take that into account as well. So that they're maximizing. There's a very good book about the public value, which attempts to estimate how much the BBC is really worth to society. And it's way above the license fee, 2 or 3 times what the license fee is. Nothing wrong with popularity and reach, none whatsoever. And indeed, it's when that's one of the very clever things that every so often the BBC does it as a stroke of genius. It pulls people in, it's apparently an entertainment program, and then suddenly something happens and it says something and you think, oh God, I never thought of that. It extends where you might have gone. And when it does that, I think it's absolutely phenomenal. Makes the hair stand up on my neck.
Back to Tim Davie. Now, if you call you in again and say, look, Andrew, I've got to lose £500 million off of the budgets. How can I lose it? What would you advise?
I think I don't have a sound. Look, I could trot out something, but it would be off the top of my head.
The problems, the orchestras, would you keep them?
Sorry, no, I don't. I'm not going to be pulled into saying something I'd name that's to be cut. I think that I would need to. I haven't thought about the question, and if I haven't thought about a question, I'd much prefer not to go snap judgment. That's the way to stupidity.
Fair enough. Now, 2022 is the 100th anniversary of the BBC, of course. Should the nation look back on the first 100 years?
Well, I think that if they can ignore all the sniping and see the big picture and recognize, as I think I did clearly, that the BBC's got some faults. You know, is it perfect? Absolutely not. But if you think back over the big moments of the last 100 years, a great many of them were moments that you might remember through the BBC. I mean, that was that extraordinary Diana interview on Panorama. Absolutely extraordinary. Or other, I've already mentioned the Live Aid, and I mentioned the broadcast. But go back, coronations, deaths of great people, election coverages, great entertainment. Those wonderful programs I've forgotten the name of the man. He does those, gets choirs all around the country singing. It's just tremendous stuff.
Yeah.
I thought that just made me feel delighted and thrilled and pleased. And I think that if most people would find that over the last, not many people watching this program will be quite as elderly as I am. I'm still trying to be engaged and keeping young. But I think they'd find in their lives there'd been things that mattered to them. And some of those would have been things that happened on the BBC, and they'd be proud of it.
So will you accept your free license fee if it's offered to you? You're over 75.
Well, no, I don't want to.
You don't want it?
I want to watch BBC, but I think it's rather ridiculous that people like me should get it free. It should never have been done in the first place, right?
It was done by your party. It was done by Gordon Brown.
I know, but I just said I'm more a Democrat than a member of the Labour Party. It was not a good move in the first place. It's about welfare, not about broadcasting. And it was a confusion at the beginning. The BBC is there to serve everybody, and the license fee is there for everybody. And we don't want to get the two mixed up.
A question for Professor Ivor Gaber. From a friend of the BBC, he says,
that's better than an enemy.
And continue to damage itself by its inability to recognise legitimate criticism of its news and current affairs output. Is it too sensitive about news and current affairs?
It's been a bit low on the risk-taking front, I would say, yes. And I think that's where I think that Tim Davie may be having a problem with the partiality point. I don't know quite what your question has in mind, whether he thinks that it's been too too much pro-Brexit, too anti-Brexit, too much pro-climate change, too anti-climate change.
I think the Brexit particularly, he thinks due impartiality has meant that people, so you have five Nobel Prize winners in economics against Minford, and give an equal balance.
I think let's distinguish between these. Let me distinguish the climate change debate and the Brexit debate. The country was genuinely divided on Brexit, and I think the BBC faced a very, very difficult job. I don't think they were quite brave enough in calling out people who were telling lies, and they should have been braver to do that. And that should have been done not in a program which tries to balance the truth, but just as a fact checking. There should be there are lots of organizations which are doing this now, and the BBC does it, but it should have a program that says we've fact checked what was said by the leader of the opposition and by the Prime Minister, and this is what we think.
So it should be incidental, it should be integral, you're saying?
Yes, absolutely integral.
So you shouldn't have to go to the online site to find out the fact checks. They should actually have it in the news and say, let's check that out, shall we?
Yes.
Or this afternoon, for example.
Exactly.
And would that be within the BBC Charter and within its purposes?
Why? I mean, it's not to expect somebody to be a truth teller. There's nothing against its charter in that. Informing people, educating them.
What hopes do you have? What hopes do you have for Tim Davies' Director Generalship?
Too early. Lots of hopes. Too early.
This is like Mao Zedong. Come on, Andrew.
No. Look, I don't know him personally. He knows the BBC very well. He comes from the commercial side of the BBC. I thought the speech in Cardiff was quite well placed, and I think he's got the skill set to try and do a good set of things. I think that he faces horrendous difficulties, and so if he outperforms, low hopes, we'll all be thrilled.
So will he save the BBC?
I don't mean my hopes. I don't mind my hopes of him are low. I just think it's going to be a very, very difficult environment in which to be Director General. And I give him all my possible support. He probably doesn't want it, but I'm very happy to give it to him.
He'll probably watch this. So is the BBC in peril, do you think?
Yes.
How much?
Probably more than than your judiciary.
Right.
I don't know how to rate it vis-a-vis the civil service. And it's under threat because there are a set of people who've been orchestrating the criticisms of it for a long time. I went right back to Peacock and the mistakes that I thought had been made then, but nobody's ever got out and really kept saying that was a mistake, that to see the BBC is just like a market selling of books. And so it goes on and on and on. It becomes more and more technologically determined that we have to do this. So I do think that the forces arranged against the BBC are pretty large. And so I think it's really and it's in the case of Dominic Cummings, if he stays in number 10 or he's moved to the Cabinet Office and he's pulled all the special advisors in to report to him, so much for an independent civil service. If he's pulled all those and he's reporting to Michael Gove, who must be looking rather interestingly at a certain job, I think the BBC is under serious threat, yes.
No, we've sort of come to an end, but what is your overall message, you think, to A, to the audience, and B, to the BBC?
The BBC, my overall message is that in the world of social media, we need the BBC far, far more than we ever have done in the past. We're getting more divided, we're getting more into echo chambers, we need to be brought together. We need rational argument, we need truth tellers, and we need broadcasters which don't have the same purposes as the market, so that they can help the market work better. They're complementary, not competitive with the market. The BBC has done an absolutely formidable job. It should not be shrunk. It should be maintained, enhanced, and encouraged to do what it was created to do.
Thank you. Well, if you want to read more of Andrew, you can read, he's contributed to 2 books already on the BBC in peril, and will contribute to the 3rd one, which is called Winter of Discontent. That'll be out in middle of October, we hope. It's currently been written by some very distinguished people, including Andrew. So that's on Amazon. All those 2 books. Peter York and Paddy Barwise's book is out in December, I think, and that's on Penguin. So please read that.
I think they may be bringing it forward. The case against the arguments here are so pressing. I think that they're going to bring that book forward.
Now, I wouldn't like to be in their position because they're having to change the book every week, I would have thought. C'est la vie. Now, if you want to see more, tomorrow evening at 5:30, Jim White, who's another Greater Jericho resident of the Daily Telegraph as a writer. He's a great sports columnist. That's at 5:30 tomorrow. Next week, on Wednesday next week, look at that. Michael Cockerell, who is a TV legend, talking about he's made some brilliant films on politicians, including one on Boris, and where Boris said, if the ball comes loose in the scrum, I'll grab it, and also one on Alan Clark, who was sort of a version of Boris 20 years before that. So each and every Wednesday there is a My Virtual Jericho at 5:30. You register on Eventbrite, but you watch it on YouTube. And if you want to watch this on YouTube, it's there forever. I'll send you the URL later on. Finally, let's end where we begun, with the BBC's message to the nation during the pandemic. They missed a trick there in this. This was their BBC corporate to the nation. They used the tagline, the BBC bringing us closer together. Why didn't they use the tagline, the BBC bringing Britain close together? The BBC. Over to them.
Okay, ready.
One day, I will tell you there are no new cases.
And I'll read that the Nightingale is closing down.
We'll take time to reflect and remember those lives lost.
And we'll hug our loved ones.
Our kids will play with their friends and finally go back to school.
We will see our colleagues again.
Sport will return, whether you like it or not.
Cafes, shops and cinemas will open their doors.
One day, plans will be made and kept.
And until then, we'll be here to help you understand what's happening every step of the way.